a story to share, you are always welcome to the Bantabaso. I am Tijan. Until I come your way next week, bye-bye.
Africa bele no mala.
This week, we are going to take you on a mental journey to Venezuela and Kenya, where we are going to examine and analyze Chavez's legacy and the aftermath of the Kenyan elections. I am Ibrahim Abalde. You're watching Weekend Spectrum on GRTS. Start of the week, the IMF's mission chief to the Gambia, David Dunn, was in the country as part of an official assignment. After his audience with the president and senior government officials, David Dunn took time out of his busy schedule to answer to some questions from local journalists. Here, he spoke about prospects for the value-added tax being introduced in the Gambia.
It replaced an already existing tax. Okay, there was a sales tax of 15% that should have been paid by, collected and paid by the same businesses that are now collecting a 15% value-added tax. So really, the direct impact of introducing a VAT, in fact, in many ways, should have been beneficial to businesses, because now they're able to get a credit for the VAT that they paid on the inputs. For restaurant, if they bought fruits and vegetables, or I guess food tends to be exempt. But you know, if a business had to make imports and paid VAT on those imports, they now can claim a credit against that payment. So, in fact, the VAT should be easier for most businesses. But the VAT is a new tax, and it takes time for people to get used to it. And there's an administration process. I mean, the GRA has made efforts to educate the business community and the general population on how the VAT works, but it takes a little time. And my impression is that things are going more smoothly now, that some of the maybe opportunistic increases in prices by some businesses have been, receding. But I'm optimistic that before very long, the VAT should be working quite smoothly.
Let me take you to Kenya, where our colleagues are standing by. Political science graduate from the University of the Gambia, Abubakar Dabo and Mamadou Jallo, have been analyzing the Kenyan political situations after the elections.
What do you make out of the Kenyan elections? Even though Uhuru Kenyatta, the victor or the winner of that election, who is taunted by the International Criminal Court, ICC, accusing him of crimes against humanity, even though he's the democratically elected president of Kenya, as confirmed by the Independent Electoral Commission of Kenya.
Thank you, Balde. I think first and foremost, I must say that the Kenyan elections had put many critics wrong, because the build-up towards the elections, there was a lot of talk of violence. I think concentration was so much on the violence because maybe to some extent they may be right, looking at what happened during the previous election. So everybody was talking about what would happen, the violence, how many people, might be killed, property lost and all that, and the alarm bells were ringing, and there was so much concentration on violence, and so many people, analysts, so many people watching the elections forgot about the elections themselves. For the simple, but on the other hand, there was also so much talk about the indictment of two of the candidates, that is the president himself, the president-elect, that is Uhuru Kenyatta, and his running mate William Ruto. So these issues more or less saved the elections. Opinion was so much concentrated on these two issues. But nonetheless, I was very much, for me, after the elections and the results were announced, I was happy. At least Kenyans have matured and they have proved everybody wrong, that African elections are just marked by violence, rigging, and all that stuff. It passed off peacefully, much to the satisfaction of many people, though Odinga is still contesting the vote.
Well, if you look at the Kenyan election, that brings to mind our own elections here in the Gambia. The local government elections, you went for the nomination, you covered the nomination in CRR, and Kenya is emerging from elections. So you can see Africa, the month or the year, we've seen decisive elections. Kenyan election, no one was expecting, well, not many people are expecting that Uhuru is going to emerge a winner. This is not the first time he's actually contested. He's win, even though ICC is there waiting for him. How do you see the shape, the trend in Africa as regard election, especially the one here we have in the Gambia?
Yeah, I think looking at the elections in Africa, democracy in Africa, it is taking hold. There is no doubt about that. You may have some hitches here and there in certain countries, but generally, if you look at the picture in Africa, elections are getting the desired effect. Like I said earlier, in Kenya, everybody was predicting about an election marked by violence, vote rigging and all that. Tribal elections between the two major tribal groups, that is the Kalenjin on the other hand and the Kikuyu. Because if you look at the two candidates, one is from the majority Kikuyu and the other from the Kalenjin. There's Kenyatta from the Kikuyu and Odinga from the Kalenjin. So these tribal politics that had caused a lot of problems during the past elections in Kenya, everybody was anticipating this, but it never happened. So this shows that people have matured, Africans have matured. They are able to hold their own elections that are free, democratic, and fair. So in the Gambia here, you also seen the coming of the local government elections. You were in the Upper River region, I was in the Central River region. So we've seen the conduct of the nominations. They are all hitch-free. There are no problems. The turnout was impressive to a large extent, because if you look at it, independent candidates came up, the NRP candidates, but unfortunately, some of the major parties decided to boycott. But nonetheless, the process, as we've seen, was very peaceful and hitch-free.
Well, finally, Jallo, before we leave you, we want to know actually your opinion as regard an interview Jendai Fraser, former U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Africa, granted to the BBC. It's an excerpt we actually will be playing on the program, later in the program. Well, to cut a long story short, Jendai Fraser is saying that, is talking about meddling in elections in Africa, and that the Kenyan people had elected Uhuru Kenyatta as the Democratic president of Kenya. So with the accusations being leveled against him are only mere accusations. They are not actually, he is not actually an indicted war criminal. That's the word here. Finally, how do you cover up the whole thing about, elections, people deciding who they want, and somebody else saying that, look, this guy is tainted, don't bank on him?
Yeah, looking at the case of Kenya, the case of Kenya is very interesting. I think for the first time in the history of Africa and in the history of the ICC, we've seen the presidential candidate being accused of crimes. Yeah, and this they have thought many people have thought would discredit Kenyatta, but it turned out to be one of his biggest strengths, that he is popular, the people want him. So the question now for me, what I ask is, if you were a war criminal, as many people allege, would his people already, would his people vote